Qatar's emir accuses Israel of violating the Gaza ceasefire agreement. The Russian president meets with the Iranian foreign minister in Moscow. And France's summit reinforces commitment to Ukraine's peace. Hello, good evening. We start tonight in Cairo, where President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has stressed the establishment of a Palestinian state along the June 4th, 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital, remains the only path to lasting peace and stability in the region. The remarks came during talks in Cairo with the President of Slovenia's National Assembly, Urška Kalakja-Zupančič. Discussions focused on strengthening cooperation between Egypt and Slovenia, with both sides highlighting the role of parliaments in boosting economic and investment ties. The meeting also addressed regional developments and the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has reaffirmed Egypt's full backing for the Arab Parliament as a platform for dialogue and joint Arab action. During a meeting with Arab Parliament President Mohammed el-Yumehi and House Speaker Hanefi Geberi, el-Sisi highlighted the importance of unified Arab efforts in navigating current regional challenges. El-Yumehi praised Egypt's role in advancing ceasefire efforts in Gaza, facilitating detainee releases and ensuring the flow of humanitarian aid. He also underscored the significance of continued coordination with Egypt on key Arab issues. Russian President Vladimir Putin has received the Emir of Qatar, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, in Moscow for high-level talks on regional and bilateral issues. Putin reaffirmed that the two-state solution and the establishment of a Palestinian state remain the only viable path to lasting peace in the region. The Qatari Emir highlighted the ongoing coordination between Doha and Moscow across various matters and confirmed that several agreements will be signed during the summit. Qatar's Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani has accused Israel of failing to uphold the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. Speaking in Moscow during talks with President Putin, the Emir said Qatar would continue efforts to bridge gaps between parties and reach an agreement to end the suffering of Palestinians. President Putin reiterated the two-state solution remains the only viable path to resolve the Middle East crisis. So in a policy shift, Israel's defense minister has declared permanent military presence in Gaza amidst escalating humanitarian crisis.
Israel's defense minister Israel Katz has announced that Israeli troops will remain in the buffer zones they have carved inside Gaza, even after any future settlement to end the war. The statement comes amid faltering ceasefire talks and marks a shift in policy, with Katz declaring that Israeli occupation forces will not evacuate areas already seized, but instead stay as a permanent buffer between Palestinian areas and Israeli communities, similar to tactics used in Lebanon and Syria. Since military operations resumed on March 18th, Israeli forces have imposed control over 30% of Gaza, including the entirety of Rafah city, and the South occupation forces are also erecting the so-called Morag Corridor. to isolate Rafah from the rest of the Gaza Strip. The Netzarim corridor in central Gaza and smaller buffer zones north of Gaza City have further squeezed over 2 million Palestinians into shrinking areas. The United Nations Humanitarian Agency, OCHA, reports that over 400,000 Palestinians have been displaced in just 1 month. Meanwhile, at least 1,630 people have been killed in ongoing Israeli bombardments. Doctors Without Borders (MSF) said Gaza has become a mass grave, warning of the forced displacement of an entire population and the collapse of humanitarian efforts. Despite growing criticism, Katz confirmed Israel's blockade on aid will continue, although infrastructure is supposedly being prepared to distribute supplies through civilian contractors in the future. As destruction escalates, the humanitarian crisis deepens, raising urgent questions about the future of Gaza's population and the international community's response.
Now, the Arab League Secretary-General, Ahmed Abul-Gheit, has warned that the Palestinian cause is facing the most dangerous threat in its history, amid what he called shameful global silence. In a statement, he firmly rejected any forced displacement of Palestinians and called for an immediate end to Israeli massacres. He urged the start of reconstruction efforts and a clear path toward a two-state solution. The Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has condemned the racist remarks made by extremist Israeli Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has repeatedly encouraged settlers to intensify their incursions into Al-Aqsa Mosque. These statements serve as further evidence of the Israeli government's dangerous plans to Judaize occupied Jerusalem, including annexation efforts. The ministry warned that such rhetoric indicates Israel's intentions to alter the legal and historical status of Jerusalem, necessitating a firm international response to protect the city's Islamic and Christian sanctities. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, has reported that nearly 69% of Gaza's population is living under continuous displacement orders as renewed Israeli military operations force mass evacuations. Approximately 420,000 Palestinians have been newly displaced since the fighting resumed. The agency also confirmed that no humanitarian aid has entered the Strip since March 2nd due to the ongoing Israeli blockade imposed after the collapse of the ceasefire. The Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor has warned that famine is beginning to spread across Gaza, 45 days into a complete Israeli siege. The organization accused Israel of systematically destroying what remains of Gaza's agricultural and food infrastructure in recent weeks. The group labeled the use of starvation as one of the most brutal forms of genocide. Russian President Vladimir Putin has met with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi at the Kremlin. Araghchi delivered a letter from the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and discussed Iran's nuclear negotiations with the US. The meeting occurred ahead of the second round of US-Iran talks in Rome, following initial discussions in Oman described as constructive. US President Trump has warned of potential military action if no agreement is reached, while Iran insists on its right to enrich uranium. Russia, a key ally of Iran, continues to play a significant role in these negotiations. French President Emmanuel Macron has welcomed the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the Elysee Palace in Paris. This meeting coincided with the visit of White House envoy Steve Witkoff and diplomats from Ukraine and Britain, who are also in discussions with French officials. The high-level meetings highlight growing European concerns regarding the US administration's approach to Moscow, especially following the unsuccessful attempts to broker a ceasefire in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. Also, US officials plan to discuss nuclear negotiations with Iran. As you've been hearing, French President Macron has hosted the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, European leaders and Ukrainian officials in Paris to reinforce the commitment to a durable peace in Ukraine. The summit highlighted European concerns over President Trump's perceived leniency towards Russia, especially after his unsuccessful ceasefire initiative. While Ukraine accepted the proposed truce, Russia declined, leading to continued hostilities, including a deadly attack in Sumy. Discussions also addressed Iran's nuclear program. These high-level talks in Paris have brought together US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Trump envoy Steve Witkoff, and European and Ukrainian officials to address the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. The discussions focused on securing a full ceasefire and establishing a robust security framework for Ukraine. European leaders expressed concerns over the Trump administration's approach toward Moscow, especially after the unsuccessful attempts to broker a ceasefire. Ukraine emphasized the need for security guarantees and a multinational military deployment, while Russia has insisted ceasefire proposals demanding an end to Western military support for Kyiv. Now here's a recap of tonight's main news headlines. Qatar's Emir accuses Israel of violating the ceasefire agreement. The Russian president meets with the Iranian foreign minister in Moscow. And France's summit reinforces the commitment to Ukraine's peace. And that's all for tonight, but don't forget you can follow Qnews on our social media platforms at Qnews EGY. Thanks for watching and have a very good evening.